Hello, hello, you amazing people, and welcome to a bit of a behind the scenes. I wanted to sort of make a video on how I do some of the animations that I've done recently. And this one I did for a channel called Bigen 2 or Bigen 11, not entirely sure which. But I created this in Blender, which is a free software. You can use it for 3D modeling, which I'm sort of dabbling in as well. But it's got a feature called Grease Pencil, and I actually really like it. So I want to start off with a picture of what I'm wanting to make, and of course in this one I'm making Bigen. So I drag the picture in. I think I just took a screenshot from one of his YouTube channels. And I go into the properties to turn on the opacity to about 0.5, so it's about 50% or half opacity. And that way it's just sort of easier to line it up and see what we're doing here. Again, with Grease Pencil, it doesn't really matter whether it's symmetrical because you can move it around if you need to. And I've made the picture not selectable so that I don't accidentally click on it and select it when I'm trying to do things. And then I add in a grease pencil, and I'm somebody who loves layers, so I will be using a lot of layers. And I have a layer for the outline, and then you create your material. And I like to sort of build a basis of what the outline would be and what the base color would be, but then sort of duplicate the color so that I've got two versions of it. I'll sort of explain it a bit more when we get further in. But I do like having the outline just a little bit darker than the base color. And then make sure that you copy when you're duplicating the color, because if you try and just have a second version of it, you'll just end up changing the original. So you need to make sure you hit that copy so that you get a second version, I guess, a second copy of it that you can actually change without altering the original one. And then I'm just going to make a circle and go into the sculpt, and then using the grab tool I can push it around and get it into a good shape. And then if you hold down shift, it sort of switches to the smooth tool so you can smooth it out. I'm just trying to get a general shape. Now I'm smoothing it. Not too worried about the chin because I'm going to put a beard over the top of it anyway. And I've gone back to the picture and I'm putting it in front, and that way the picture will always be on top. And with the opacity, it means that we can see through it and still see what we're working on, but it's just a bit easier to see the actual picture. And then when I have the outline in a fairly reasonable shape, I create another layer underneath the outline, and I've called it head in capital letters because I'll use that as a base. And make sure you turn the use lights off, otherwise you get really dark spots in your picture. And I duplicate the outline layer and then move that duplication to the head, and that way they're sort of the same shape. And I just change the material to match the skin tone. You can see there I've changed the picture to be in front so you can actually see it through the skin tone through the picture. And I started to smooth it but realized that I didn't have both of the layers unlocked, so I was only affecting one, and I had to go back and unlock the layer. And then I'm locking both of them, and I'll create a new layer for the shadows. And again, I really like having layers. I probably have way too many. But then you can use the mask on the head, which is the base layer, and that will lock anything that I do on the shadow layer to just that area that's already been drawn. And again, I'm copying the skin color or material. Remember to copy it, and then I'm adjusting, making it just a little bit darker. I do remember learning that when you want to go for darker, shadowy kind of colors, you want to go more towards blues, and then with lighter highlights, you sort of want to go more to yellows and warmer colors. But I sort of just pick something that I think will look good, and you can change it later. So the way that I've done it, I've got like the skin base color, and then I've got the shadow color, and if I'm not happy with it, which I will actually change it later, you can adjust the material and it'll change everything that you've made with that particular material. And so here I'm just smoothing out the edges because I use the point-to-point tool, and so it's very chunky and clunky. And then you just smooth it out with the sculpt tool. And I'm hiding the picture of the face so that I can see what I'm actually working with and just sort of get something that looks good for the drawing. And then I create a new layer for the highlights. Add the mask. You'll see a bit later where I forget to add the mask and what happens. And copying the skin to create a skin highlight material. You can eyedropper the material, but it sort of didn't really work, so I ended up altering it slightly. You just sort of find something that you're happy with that looks good, and with the highlights and the shadows, I always put that layer to 50% opacity so that you've got some of the original showing through, and I think it just sort of looks a little bit better doing it that way. And then here I'm just using the circle tool and then the grab tool in the sculpt mode to try and get a good shape. I tend to like doing it that way as well. And if you need to, you can go into the edit tab and add more points in to give it more texture, make it smoother. You'll see here I'm trying to merge two of them and they're not quite merging, so I've gone into the edit mode and I'm just going to pull some of those over so that they overlap. But I do actually fix this later. But for now I'm just trying to make it line up a bit better. And I'm adding highlights, which the eyebrow ones I end up just using as the eyebrows in the end. I sort of didn't bother creating eyebrows because he's got very, very hard to see eyebrows. But for now I'm just sort of trying to get that contour of the face, what planes, you know, where the light would be hitting, trying to get some depth. And this is where I start adjusting the colour a little bit because I'm not quite happy with it. It's a bit too white and I want to make it a bit more skin toned, a bit more fleshy. And I'm playing around with different opacities trying to get it to look right. But I do come back and change that later. You don't need to worry too much because for the most part you can change everything later as you go. And now I'm just getting an outline for the eyes, getting a rough shape. I don't know if you can hear the neighbours' chickens or not. They're all in my yard at the moment. Cute little things. And then I make a new layer for the whites of the eyes. Again, I create layers for everything. There's probably easier ways to do it, but I just like that because it's easier. You can adjust each different thing without having to worry about wrecking everything else that you've done. And again, I'm just Shift D to duplicate it and then right click to snap it back to where it was. And then I'll hit M, I think it is, and move it to a different layer so that I've got it on my own separate layer. And then you can create the material and assign a material to it. And let me know if you're interested. I can try and go into more detail and get a little thing that shows up on the screen of what buttons I'm pressing if you want to follow along. That's something that you'd be interested in. And here I was trying to figure out what his eye colour was. And I'm Australian, so I spell colour with a U. And I tried to eyedropper the colour, but it just wasn't anything that I was happy with, so I'm just sort of manually getting a bluey grey colour. I'm sort of partially going with what the picture is and then also going with what looks good because, you know, artist. Now, the other thing I should mention is when I first created this, for some reason it always defaults to pencil, which means that it's not a solid line, it's sort of graded, or, you know, the opacity is down a little bit. So here I was trying to use the sculpt tools where you can strengthen the line and get it thicker. I'm trying to line up the eyes so that they look a bit better, a bit more symmetrical. And it's the type of thing you keep working on one thing, then you move to something else, and then you go back to the other one, and you just sort of work it out. And this is the edit where you can manually move different points, but in the end I decided to delete the overlapping points and just join it together so that it was one thing, and it was a lot easier to deal with, but I cover it all up with the hair anyway, so it's not a huge deal. And if you feel like he's missing a nose, I do correct that later. Just keep tweaking the shapes, trying to get something that looks good that emphasizes the different contours of the face. When you start learning about topology, you'll find yourself wondering what the topology is every time you look at somebody's face. It's really funny. And this is where I'm filling in the nose. At the moment I'm just sort of sticking to that reddish shadow and getting the basic shape. Making sure it's centered. And I'm adding some depth to the eyes. Give them a bit more shape. Smoothing it out by holding Shift. And then checking to see how we're going and how it's looking. And again, adjusting the different materials. Try and find something that I'm happy with. And moving on to the mouth, I was originally going to do the whole mouth, but then I thought it'll be a lot easier to be able to move it and do things if I have the two lips separately. So in the end I did the upper lip and the lower lip. Because sometimes you want to be able to adjust something without moving the entire thing, and I just find it easier to have it on a separate layer. And again, I'm duplicating it, and then I'll move it to a different layer so that I've got the outline and I've got the color separately. And the reason why I do it that way is so that when I add shadows and highlights and that kind of thing, I can put the outline over the top of the shadows, and that way it sort of blends in and hides it a bit better. So again, just sort of getting that general shape, something I'm happy with. Then adding layers for the lower lip and just repeating the same process again. See, it's times like this that I like having them on separate layers, because otherwise you'll be interfering with the top lip while you're trying to get the shape of the bottom lip. That's just how I like to do things, I guess. Now creating some shadows for the lips to try and give them some more definition. And I chose to go with the point-to-point tool because it's easier. And this is where the mask comes in. So I've actually drawn it beyond that, but with the mask it sticks to just the lip, so you can have more control over what you're doing. And it's really useful. I mean, you can manually push it all into line so that it's all nice and neat and you don't have those extra boxes around the outside of your picture, but it's really not necessary. I'm just fiddling with the colours, and then I want to add some shadow to the top lip. Add the mask so that it stays to the top lip. Make sure you turn the lights off. You will see why later on, but if you use lights, it doesn't show up properly when you try and take a picture. Again, I will explain that more later. And here I'm just adjusting the thickness of the outline by using Alt-S and then changing the thickness just to make it a bit thinner. I sort of like having the face a little bit thinner than the rest of the body and the rest of the head. Adding in the pupils. And what I did there was I went into the edit mode, clicked on one point, and then you can press L and that will select everything that that one point is connected to, so it's just an easy way to grab a particular item or object. And I'm adjusting the colour of the lips to try and make it a bit more subtle and discreet, something that looks a bit better. And then whenever I'm drawing eyes, I like to put those little, like, sunspots or whatever they're called, you know, those little lights that they have shining in the eyes. And I duplicate it, I change the colour of the eye whites to make it stand out a bit more, and I do move them slightly later. Right now I want to add some shadow to the eyes to try and give the white of the eyes a bit of a bit of depth, and that's where I accidentally changed the wrong material. So you can see how the materials work. That's why it's really good to label everything. Label your layers, label your materials, that way you know what they are. And be careful about using the same material on different things, because if you want to change the colour of one, you'll change the colour of everything. I'm just going to move that over, mask it to the eye white. And then I'm going to draw in some detail for the nose. And this actually ended up confusing me quite a lot for ages. So you'll see in a second. So I drew it in, smoothed it out. Lazily added in some nostrils. Just because I couldn't be bothered making a new texture or a new material, so I just used that in the end. But again, I put it on a separate layer so I could adjust the opacity and get it looking good. And it was around then that I realized that the nose looked way darker than the rest. And so I was trying to figure out if I could get it from the pencil stroke to the pen, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So I spent hours trying to build up the strength of it and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, I just gave up and redid it. And for some reason, I couldn't get it to smooth out with the smooth tool. And eventually I did work out it's because I didn't have the right tool selected. But this is another way that you can adjust things, is go into edit mode, pick a point, and then with the proportional editing on, which I think is O on the keyboard, you can actually change the size of how much you're affecting of the surrounding points. But I just went back to the sculpt tool and then realized that I was still on the strength tool, not the grab tool, so it was an easy fix. And I'm still confused as to why the nose looks so much darker than the outline. And eventually I worked out that it's literally just an optical illusion, and they are the same. It just looks different because it's in a different, like it's surrounded by a different color, I guess. So to try and figure it out, I tried to copy that and ended up with the proportional editing, and I just moved it over to this edge and realized that they were actually the same color and the same shade and everything, and then I just hit undo to move it back again. And I just sort of gave up trying to figure it out then and moved on to the hair. And again, you just roughly sketch out. And I just wanted to make it one piece, so I sort of went all the way around, and then I'll come back following the contour. Then worked out that he had a moustache, and I decided to sort of split it around the mouth and make it easier. Smooth it all out so it's all nice and neat. Then get the shape correct. And I liked having that split in the middle of the moustache, it sort of looked a bit more natural. Just keep tweaking the shape. I was trying to figure out what shape to do the bottom of the beard in, and I tried a few different things, but in the end I just went with a rounded sort of thing. Wanted to add some extra details, give it some shape, some texture. And you would have seen then that I went into the edit tools or edit mode and grabbed some of the points, and then you right click and hit subdivide, and that creates a whole lot more points, so it gives you a smoother edge. Then I'm just getting an overall shape of everything until it looks good. I started off with a more pointed beard, but I eventually went with a more rounded one. And it's really good to have references so that you can check your work and just get an idea of proportions and what it should look like. Using the grab tool to push and pull things, create those more defined bumps and things, but then I sort of smoothed it all out anyway. That's looking pretty good so far, I think. And then I realised that his beard is actually a lot closer to his mouth, so I moved it all in, got the good shape. You just keep tweaking it, pulling back, having a look, seeing what needs to change. I realised that the nose had disappeared, so I had to get that back again. And of course, when I turned the outline on, I had to fix the hair so that the hair was over it. And I made the nose a bit thinner so that it wasn't as prominent. And of course, adding shadows. Give it some depth. And again, you just use the mask to keep it locked to the hair so that you can draw around it a lot easier. And I made it nice and thick at first, but I did actually make the shadows a bit smaller and change the shape of them. Trying to join the shadows together a bit more. Turn the opacity down, but then I'm like, nah, that doesn't look right. I need to stretch it out and keep it more white. And give it some depth and contour. I think it just looked better in the end. That's where I added more points to give it more definition, make it smoother. Then go into draw mode so that it gets rid of all those lines and I can actually see what's happening. And then tweaking it more. Again, you want to sort of think about the shadows of where they would naturally fall. I was following the picture that I had on the side there to some degree. And then pressing E to extrude the point out to make sure that it was all covered. And I wasn't happy with that, so I just keep moving things around, adding more points in. And then I add in some highlights. Another good example where the mask comes in handy, because I can get that white just around the mouth and not have to worry about it. And then I just stretch it out to try and make it look a bit better. And again, putting it in draw mode to get a good look at it. Add some highlights to the top of the hair. It's looking pretty good. And then just fixing the shape of the base of the hair. So we're on the hair layer. You can really lock off each layer and only have one layer unlocked so that you're only affecting that layer. Or you can have multiple layers and you'll be able to affect all of them. And it's a really good way to just sort of get that extra control. And here I wanted to try and add some of the ginger back into his beard, because you'll see that he's got just a little touch of ginger still. And I was trying to figure out how to get the shading and the just sort of that hint of colour without it being too overpowering or too overbearing or a bit too monotoned. And it took me a while to figure it out, but I think I got there eventually. Working out the opacity, trying to change the color, trying to get something that's a bit more natural looking. Because I needed to make sure that the beard actually looked orange, like it was ginger hair, and not that part of his beard was see-through or something. It sort of just didn't quite look right, so it took me a while to sort of play around with it, but got there eventually. And in the end I decided to move it down and have a bit more white showing through. Smoothing it out, getting the shape right. See, again, I'm trying to copy the picture that I've got there. Play around with the opacity again, trying to get it to look good. And I like the subtle, you know, there's a little bit of ginger, but it's still quite subtle. And that's looking pretty good. So then I add a camera, but I'm at the wrong angle, so I delete that camera, go back to numpad 1, which is sort of the front-on view. And then when I spawn the camera in, it just creates it facing in that particular direction, and it's just a lot easier. And then I moved the grease pencil forward just a fraction and created a second grease pencil just so I could make the shoulders, and that way I didn't have to worry about moving them or doing anything with them. It was just sort of more background than anything. I didn't end up adding a background in the end. And there I was following the picture, the contour of the picture, and then I realized that the mic was actually in front of it and I was getting a weird shape, so I had to fix that up. And then pressing O, you go into the camera mode so you can see the box of where the camera is actually seeing. So I made sure that the shoulders were below that and then rendered a picture, and you can see the black spots because the lights, use lights were ticked on some of the layers. So I'm going through turning off the use lights. And then I'll render the picture again. Oh yeah, I also need to change some of the settings. I'm trying to find them. The color management, you want to leave it on standard. And there we go, looking pretty good. Still want to tweak things though. Make sure that the Z and combined is turned on. I don't know why, it just says that you need it. Then I wanted to add in some highlights on the lips just to give them a bit more depth and sparkle. It's a little bit more specific to female lips generally because it sort of gives it that glossy look, but I wanted to do something a bit subtle and just give it that extra detail. And I do change the shape of the top highlights in the end because I wasn't quite happy with it. Rendering just to take a look, decided I wasn't happy, so I changed it. Fix the color to make it a bit more subtle again, and then render it again to have a look. You just keep tweaking it until you're happy with it. It's really important to make sure that you have everything looking good before you start animating it, because it's a lot more complicated to change once you've started adding in all the animation things. So you just want to keep tweaking, looking at the shape, looking at the color, looking at the shade, how it all fits together. Adding in that depth and detail. Just taking a moment to sort of absorb the thing and whether there's anything that stands out that I need to fix. I decided to add a bit more ginger, just to give it a bit more character and depth. And then for animating, I add a new window. I actually add two of them. One of them has the dope sheet, which gives you a breakdown of all of the different layers, and then the other one is just a timeline. It makes it a bit easier. Now, the dot that I just turned on in the middle of the screen at the timeline is a automatic, whenever you make a change, it will put in the, what do you call it? So it will mark it on the timeline. And I keep putting it on the wrong thing because I'm testing it to see how it looks, and then forget that I've actually moved past the point that I'm trying to make it. And just adjusting. So again, this is where you want to lock any layers that you don't want to move, and then unlock the layers that you do want to move. And it just makes it a lot easier so that only the layers that you want changing are actually affected. And here I tried to mirror it, but it didn't quite work. And I think part of the problem was because I didn't have the hair selected. I had the hair locked. And then you can duplicate the different points, make it easier. So I duplicated frame 1 to frame 10, and then I duplicated frame 5 to frame 15 and mirrored it, but then I wasn't real happy with it, so I decided to just do it manually anyway. And I kept trying to move it around with the grab tool in the sculpt mode, but I just wasn't happy with it, so in the end I went with editing and then smoothed it up. Checking to make sure it looks good. If anything stands out. And I was noticing that the beard was going a bit odd towards the end of it. Just adding a bit of extra movement to the beard. So to have it looping like that, I changed the number of frames. So it starts at 1, which you always start at 1. You don't want to start at 0. I forget why, but that's a thing. And then I changed it to 25 so that it just looped through when you hit play, which is the space button, space bar. And that way I could check just that particular bit, and then I expanded it out to 50 so that I could keep working on the animation. I wanted him looking down with this disapproving look. And again, I copied the first frame just to get him back into that reset position, and I'm just adjusting the length of it so I can get a feel for how it'll look. But the way that I do things, I didn't actually render the whole animation, I just rendered the important frames, which you'll see a bit later. Now with the points on the different frames there, you can pick it up and move it, but if you're moving it on top of another one, it will overwrite whatever was on that one. So if you've made a correction, you can put it on top, but just make sure that you're not destroying the one that you actually want to keep. And then you saw the video just now of Bigen laughing. I've got it in Vegas Pro, I think it's called, Sony Vegas Pro, which is my editing program. And I had a clip of him laughing, which I've removed the audio for this particular video. But I just wanted to work out how many frames I'd need for him laughing, and I just wanted the laughter as part of the animation that I was making. And now I'm trying to make him smile and happy, which it looks weird until I do the mouth as well. And get the cheeks moving a little bit. Again, just tweaking the shape. And smile. And smile a bit more. And fix that smile. Make sure it's all on the same frame because it was all over the place. Look at that smile. So each keyframe will actually stay the same until you change it, which is why I'm sort of jumping back and forward with just that one frame, even though it's actually 5 frames, if that makes sense. You smile. Then just getting some more contour. That's where I was trying to count out how many frames I'd probably need, and then I just wanted to have him lifting his head up like he's throwing his head back laughing. I just sort of moved it all upwards and squished it up a little bit. I have a cat under my foot at the moment. So I just keep tweaking it. See, this is why you really want to make sure that you're happy with the shape and everything before you start animating it, because if you want to change one thing, you've got to go through every single frame where it's been animated and fix it, if that makes sense. And then when I'm happy with that, I'll go to the first frame, render out the image, and call it 01 and save. Again, there's probably easier ways to do it, but I found this works. Then I go to the next frame, and then I save out. You hit the plus button and it adds a number, so you get, you know, frame 1, frame 2, frame 3. And even though 1 and 3 are the same picture, I'll still save it as frame 3 just because it's easier to organize it when I'm importing it into the editing program. Now I'm just tweaking it a bit to make sure I'm happy with it. Thinking about the shape and the contour, just the overall tone of what's happening. Then I just save out each frame individually. Because you don't need to render all of the in-between ones. There I'm counting it out to make sure I haven't missed any. And now I can import all of those into my editing program. And I like making them about 5 seconds or 5 frames long to start with, and then I can work out the timing. So I'm just shrinking them all down because it starts off at like 30 frames and I just want them at about 5. That one I wanted a bit longer, so sort of emphasize that point, and I'll adjust it a bit later. But at the moment I'm just sort of getting it all in place and getting it to the right length, and then I'll start tweaking it more. And I need to save it. Make sure you save your work often because you don't want to be losing it. And then here I sort of was repeating some of the frames to finish off the laugh, but I wasn't quite happy with how symmetrical it looked, so I changed some of the tail end frames around just to get it looking a bit more authentic, and then I put it on a loop so that I can really suss it out. Decided I didn't like that one, so I put a different one in, and I liked it a bit better, and changed the length of them. And then I added in the sound clip of him laughing, then realized I had the wrong one because that didn't have anything on it. Added in the sound clip of him laughing again. Then got it lined up so that it looked good and just played around with the different frames until I had something I was happy with. Put all those in a group, move them out a bit. So I wanted to make it a bit longer in the middle and sort of get that disapproving look a bit more emphasized before he laughs. Add some volume because it was a bit quiet. I did think about putting some music over it as well, but I'd sort of decided not to in the end. And then I rendered it out. And that's how it's done. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and thank you so much for tuning in and watching. And remember, I love you. I'll see you next time. Bye!